straight into it for today. It really doesn't matter how great your product or your service is. If it's impossible for you to convey what that product and service is all about, you're really going to struggle to find new customers. And having the basic tools, of course, makes all the difference. If you have the tools, you'll have the confidence. If you have the confidence, you can win new customers. So today's session, we're going to cover two main subject areas. The one, let's talk about Zoom. And of course, when we talk about Zoom, we're using Zoom almost metaphorically. Zoom as a representation of all other tools that you might use to get yourself online and in front of your potential customers, whether it be part of a virtual trade mission or just a one-on-one meeting. And we're also, very importantly, going to talk about presenting with confidence. And that will be, to some extent, a continuation of yesterday's pitching workshop. So let's talk about Zoom, that thing that has become so pervasive and part of all our lives. Of course, it's not just Zoom. There are any number of online meeting tools. We used to refer to them as conferencing tools in the past. Now, well, they're just part of our lives. Now, it is very important to understand that not all online meeting tools are created equal. Some work better than others, and some are more appropriate for some tasks than others. Your circumstances will dictate what works best for you. Of course, in some cases, we cannot choose the tool that is put before us. Your customer might have chosen that, or you could be working through the virtual trade mission platform, in which case you have to use that one and you have to familiarize yourself with it, and you have to make sure that you know how it operates. Now, of course, it's important for you to see and be seen by your meeting participants. And in this case, those are your virtual customers. Just about any one of the current tools does exactly what you want it to do in terms of being seen and being heard. Zoom, of course, which is what we're using today and which has become pretty much the lingua franca when it comes to these matters. We all take Zoom almost for granted. There are other tools like Microsoft Teams, etc. You have to use a platform of this nature if you want to see, be seen, and be heard. If you need to share content like slide decks, well, then of course you need to choose the appropriate platform that has screen sharing capabilities. And make sure that if the choice is yours, choose one that works efficiently for you and that you can comfortably use. Again, there's the good old-fashioned Zoom. GoToMeeting has evolved quite a bit over the last year or so. It was a very clunky system. It actually works a lot better than it once did. Microsoft Teams similarly has become a lot more agile over time. Some of these are far more intuitive than others. If you need to work collaboratively on documents, so if you're putting a document up and somebody needs to comment on it, annotate it, etc., then you might want to consider an additional tool. Google Docs, Mural both work really well, and many of the tools that you will need to share and to actually collaborate on documents work intuitively and seamlessly with many of the online meeting platforms. If security is important to you, and if what you are dealing with is an enterprise or a government, there's every chance that they're not going to let you use Zoom. You're going to have to use an enterprise type of software like Cisco's WebEx. It is an enterprise solution, which means it can be a bit clunky, but it certainly has some of those very robust security measures. Of course, if yours is a large organization and you spend a lot of your time online, as we all do at the moment, you might want to consider having a bespoke solution written specifically for you and your needs. Bearing in mind, though, that if you do that, you have to find out if it's compatible with other software solutions that your potential customers will be using. And I really do just need to put this out there as well. There are times when a simple phone call really is better than any kind of online collaborative tool that you could possibly imagine. Sometimes just picking up a phone and having a one-on-one conversation is all you need to do, and in fact, all you should do. Now, we can't really have a conversation today about being online, about being present in the online environment, sharing information, etc., without also having a conversation about security. Security is paramount when it comes to anything that you could possibly do online. So before you even start, and if you haven't yet finalized a provider, you need to be having these discussions with your provider before you select them. You need to consider, does your provider have a good security track record? Now, you might recall about 8 months or so ago, there was a huge kerfuffle around Zoom where everybody had decided that Zoom wasn't safe and large companies were moving away from Zoom, enterprises were moving away, governments were moving away, etc. Many of those security issues have been resolved, they've been plugged, but you need to find out what the security level is of any of the tools that you choose to use. Does your tool meet the legal privacy and data protection requirements of your country and indeed of the country into which you are broadcasting? It's not just yours that matter, it's everybody else's too. Does your service provider have strict publicized policies on the collection and storage of data, including metadata? So anything that you're sharing online, what happens to that stuff? Is it just disappearing at the end of the day, or is it being captured and stored somewhere? If it's being captured and stored, do you know what's happening to the data? It is very important because ultimately, if there is a security breach and it can be traced back to you and your company will be liable. Ensure that any terms of a free service that you choose to use do not automatically give them access to your information. And that, unfortunately, is very often the case. If you're trialing something, if you're using a free service, which is completely free, you're not paying for the premium version, very often the catch is that they will accumulate your data and they will use it. They might even own it. So make very sure that you check that out. And of course, if you are recording, as we are today, make sure that there are strong encryption protocols in place for that material that you are now storing on a cloud server or somewhere else. You need to configure your solution appropriately. So enable the strictest security features. It might be annoying for you to have these enabled, but ultimately it will be a safeguard. Apply all the security patches that they send you and that they ask you to update, and ensure that any personal devices that your staff is using is appropriately configured. So if your staff are using their own laptops at home and they're accessing company records, running meetings from their own devices on behalf of the company, make sure that they're appropriately configured for those security settings. Also establish all meetings and webinars securely. Use unique passwords. So don't just publicize an open link on the web. If you do that, you have no idea who's going to be in that meeting. And again, you'll all recall the old Zoom bombing thing that happened a few months ago. Luckily, that's been closed. That backdoor no longer exists on Zoom, but it's not something you really want to happen. It's potentially very, very dangerous. Be conscious of unidentified meeting participants. So if somebody has entered your meeting, you don't know who they are, make sure that you are able to expel them if you cannot identify who they are and where they come from. Now, the very simple fact of presenting online is that you are in the public domain. Everything in your surrounding is part of your broadcast. You need to be very, very aware of your surroundings. Don't share confidential information in a public space. If you're going to be having a conversation and things are going to be said to you that you do not want other people to hear, you need to be wearing headphones. You also need to be very careful about what you say and how you say it. A few days ago, I was having a coffee in a cafe and somebody was having a Zoom meeting in that cafe. He was talking incredibly loudly, apart from the fact that it was really rude. He was also talking about company information that everybody in that cafe was now privy to. Don't do that. Simply just do not do it. Also be very careful that if you have a high definition camera, it could be picking up confidential information around you in your background. Your whiteboards that could have company data written on them, any charts that you have, any photographs. So if you look at my background, you can clearly see that I've got photographs on the wall. I have no problem with any of those photographs being seen by anybody that I might be talking to online. If, however, there were photographs of children, I wouldn't have them visible. I have photographs for a very specific reason, and that is that it makes my environment look more human. And that is a choice that I have consciously made. But think about what it is that people can see when they are looking through your camera into your space. Be aware of what you say. Now, it goes without saying that you shouldn't be swearing online. It's incredibly bad form and it's not professional. But the truth is, it could also be against the law. There are telecommunications laws that govern what we may and may not say. Technically, you cannot even swear on the telephone, even if you're talking to a mate. So be very careful about these things and don't discuss any information online that could violate your corporate policies. Only share what you need and what you want to share. If you don't want it seen, don't put it out there. So if you are screen sharing, be very careful that you do not start sharing your screen when you have something like your email client open. In the split second it might take you to change it, somebody could have read an email that is confidential and that should not have been in the public domain. So please make sure that you've got all of this stuff sorted out before you go live with your meeting. Only recall meetings or webinars, if you're having those, after you've alerted participants that it is happening. You need to be telling people that you are recording, even if they're not going to be visible. If they're part of something, there's a way that they, in some shape, size, or form, could have their personal data recorded. They need to be aware of the fact that you are recording the meeting. Of course, if what you're recording is people's faces and people's speech, even more reason. Then you actually need to get permission from them before you record. Now, once you've dealt with all the security stuff, and it might seem like boring stuff, but it really is very important, you have to set up your equipment appropriately. And it never ceases to amaze me. And I do an awful lot of things online. In fact, earlier today, I moderated a 3-hour workshop. It never ceases to amaze me how people who spend their lives in this environment still don't do the basics. So first of all, you need to be connected and you need to be connected appropriately. Invest in the fastest possible connection you can get and you can afford. If you have the NBN where you are, whether it be your office or your home, that's a really good place to start. Make sure that you have sufficient bandwidth to cope with just about anything you can put down the line. Now, in some cases, we can't always control what happens. There might be bad weather that affects things. I have a colleague, whenever it rains, she doesn't have any internet connection at all. So that is something that you can't control. But insofar as you can, make sure that you start with the right tools. Maximize the available bandwidth you have by turning off all other applications other than your meeting service. So if you are online on your desktop, at home, or in your office, don't also have your email client open. Don't have Facebook running or LinkedIn or anything else that could be chewing bandwidth. If you are in a home environment, ensure that no one else in your home environment is using your bandwidth. So make sure that no one is watching that movie while you're having the all-important meeting with your client. Keep the bandwidth for your purposes only when you need to do something really important online. It doesn't matter what you do, if you cannot be heard or heard properly, well, then you're not speaking, are you? That means you need a proper microphone. Check the volume of your microphone. Check your position in relation to the mic. If you speak really softly or you've got it turned down too low or you are too far away, you won't be audible. If it's too loud, there could be feedback, and that, of course, is really intrusive and not very pleasant at all. If you're using the microphone that is inbuilt in your computer, is that microphone picking up noise from your computer's fan or from your internal processor? You won't know that. You need to go online and you need to have somebody be online with you and let them tell you if they can hear a noise in the background before you have that meeting with your customer. If that's the case, you might need an external microphone. So what works best for you? It might be a USB mic, it could be a lapel mic. Some people are really comfortable with a microphone attached to their clothing. Of course, if you are using a lapel mic, be aware of the fact that every time you move, you are rubbing it and it makes an enormous noise. Maybe a headset with an inbuilt microphone is the way for you to go. So use something that is appropriate to your circumstances, but that actually does the job. And of course, and this goes without saying, but again, never ceases to amaze me, when you are not speaking, mute your microphone. Being seen is just as important as being heard. So let's talk about the camera. Every computer has an inbuilt camera, but it's not necessarily the best camera. Is your inbuilt camera appropriate to the task? Is it up to the task? And if it isn't, you're going to have to invest in an external webcam or similar. So I, for example, use a tower setup where I've got a camera with an inbuilt light and a microphone, and you can all see the microphone in shot. Some people don't like having their microphones visible. I don't mind. It's one of those things that kind of distinguishes what I do. If you have to use something, make sure that you test it before you invest the money in it. Check your position relative to the camera to find the best angle. Remember, it's always better and more flattering for you to be looking up at the camera than it is to be looking down. Just a little tip. Always look into the camera when you're presenting. Don't look at your screen. If you can see me now, you can see that I'm looking at you. When I'm looking at my screen, I'm no longer looking at you. Looking into your camera means you are actually looking somebody in the eye, and you might not even be able to see them, but they don't know that. To them, it feels as if you are looking them in the eye, and that is very, very important when you're trying to establish rapport with your audience. Again, one would almost think this is a no-brainer. But earlier today in that meeting that I was moderating, this problem occurred. You need to make sure that all of you is visible from the shoulders up. That means your entire face. Earlier today, I had a meeting that I was chairing, and one of my very important speakers had the camera angle in such a way that all we could see of her was that part of her face. Make sure that you can be seen. Nobody wants to see just the top of your head. Nobody wants to see your chest. And for goodness sakes, nobody wants to be looking at your belly. So make sure you understand where your microphone is pointing and look at yourself on the screen before you go live so that you know what other people are seeing. If you have external speakers, please ensure that your external monitors are not so loud that they are feeding back with your microphone. That again is incredibly intrusive and really annoying. You can't be seen if your lighting is not appropriate. Remember, no one can see you if you're sitting in the dark. So turn on your camera and look at yourself. See if there's enough light, where the light is coming from, etc. Turn on the lights in your office. You almost always will need more light than you naturally have in your office. If you're sitting in your home office or your work office, same rule applies. Turn on the lights. If you have natural light from a window, it needs to be behind your camera and in front of you. If your window sits behind you, you need to close a blind or a curtain, because otherwise all you will be is a silhouette. If you have a window on one side of you, again, you need to close that blind or that curtain, or else you're going to have one side of you in light and the other side in dark, and it is really very difficult for somebody to look at you that way. Also, make sure that if you cannot close that blind or curtain, you need to balance that with an artificial light from the other side. Put a table lamp on your desk, for example, or a standing lamp next to you so that you have additional light. Basic things, warm lighting is better than cool lighting. So if you have a light globe that you can change, go to a warm one. And it's simply called warm white, not difficult to find. If you have a ring, a microphone, or rather a camera ring light around your camera, go for the warm setting rather than the cool setting. Standing desks, desk lamps, etc. are really, really valuable when it comes to adequate lighting. And again, if your external camera has an inbuilt light, please use it. And this is the difference between having no light or bad light. And you can see in the case of the top photograph, you have somebody with a window behind them with lots of light, but that means that they are in silhouette, compared to the woman in the lower photograph that has really good lighting. You can see all of her face, and that makes it really easy to relate and really easy to see. Now, very importantly, when you are presenting online, and this is important in the real world as well, but it is even more so when you are presenting online, you need to be able to control your environment. What do we mean by that? Well, we mean, first of all, you need to create some private, quiet space for your meeting. If possible, of course, you can conduct those meetings separate from your household if you're working from home, or in a separate room from an open plan office. If you are able to, close your meeting room door. That way, people understand that something is going on inside that room. I would even suggest that you stick a sign on the outside saying, "Meeting in progress, do not enter." If any of you have ever seen anything online or on movies with a radio studio, there's a red light that comes on when the door is closed when somebody has activated the microphone. Well, you need something that equates to that red light that says, "Don't come in here, I'm busy." If you have to conduct your meeting in a shared space and you can't go into a boardroom or a separate meeting room or a different part of your house, tell your cohabitants and your co-workers that you are going to be online and ask them not to walk in and out of the room, and ask them to keep it down and not make a noise. Also consider what's visible behind you. Make sure that your background is tidy, first of all, and professional. So if you're working from home, do not have the dirty washing basket behind you visible in shot overflowing. Not a very good look at all. Also, make sure that nothing is visible that you do not want seen. If you are using a virtual background, and Zoom is notorious for allowing you to do the virtual background thing, as many of the others are, you can put just about anything behind you. Ensure that you choose one that is appropriate to a business environment. So please, no Star Wars Death Stars. Of course, if you're a movie maker or a game developer, then that's probably appropriate, but it isn't in a professional environment. Also understand that if you are using a virtual background, unless you have a proper green screen, everything you do will be swimming in and out of that virtual background. And that can be really disconcerting for your audience. So make sure that what you are doing works properly and that you're not swimming in and out of it. That's very, very important. And of course, ensure that nothing that you do not want seen is visible in your camera. So if you look at this picture, you can clearly see that, well, there's some problems with some of these images, aren't there? In fact, most of them have some sort of issue. And the most disconcerting of all is the fellow who is with a beard, who is in a really messy environment with all sorts of stuff behind him. You really don't want that look. And just about everybody in this picture is inappropriately attired for a work meeting. So take that into account as well. So let's get to that meeting etiquette. How would you behave in a face-to-face meeting? Would you walk into a business meeting in someone's boardroom in your sleep shorts and a t-shirt with holes in it? I don't think so. Would you be walking in drinking and eating? Would you simply sit in the boardroom and take your sandwich out? Again, I don't think so. While you're sitting in that meeting, would you be checking your phone? Probably not so. Doing it online should be no different from doing it in person. Conduct yourself the same way you would as if you were in a boardroom sitting opposite that all-important potential client. Dress appropriately. Don't do things that you would not do in a physical environment. If you're the one who's arranging the meeting, so if it's in your hands, arrange meetings for an appropriate length of time. It's much better to be at short, focused meetings than long, meandering ones that really go nowhere and that people lose attention in. Invite only the relevant people to attend the meeting. If you have been invited to make a presentation to somebody and it's not just you doing that presentation, only invite the people that are actually going to contribute to your presentation, not a body of people just to stand behind you. That doesn't achieve anything. Make sure that you test all of your tech ahead of time and be prepared for technical difficulties. Things have a nasty way of not working as you intend them to. Make sure that you've taken that into account and that you have a backup plan. And always, irrespective of whether it's your meeting or somebody else's that you are attending, be early. Even if they haven't let you in, you need to be there. That way you can double check all your settings before the meeting starts. You can make sure that your microphone is working, that your speakers are working, that your screen share functionality can work, etc. Be early. Don't arrive smack on time, and certainly don't arrive late. And if you are the meeting organizer, be early and waiting for your guests. It's just common courtesy and it's professional. Before you even start, you need to have polished your pitch, which means you need to have worked it out. And we went through this in some detail yesterday. Get that pitch right. Practice it. Make sure that you are ready to present when the opportunity arises. If you do have an opportunity to circulate documents, circulate them ahead of time so that people have an opportunity to read through the information beforehand and they're not trying to read it while you are speaking, because that way they're not listening properly to you. If it's not just you doing the presentation, if you do have colleagues with you, introduce them all at the start of the meeting and explain what their function is in that meeting. And ask for your audience to introduce themselves too. If it's just one person, well, you probably know who they are. If it's several, you might not know who all of them are. Ask who they are so that you have some context around the people that you are facing. It'll also help you to follow up after the fact. Now, allow a few minutes at the start of the meeting for casual conversation. If you're running the meeting yourself, if you have been asked personal questions by the person who is running the meeting, by all means, do that, but keep it short and sharp and get to the business end of the activities as quickly as possible. Always set the ground rules at the start of the meeting. So tell your participants that the meeting is being recorded if it is. They have to know that you are recording them. Ask all participants to mute their microphones when they're not speaking. So if you have a number of people, if you've called the meeting, ask everyone to mute their microphones. Ask them to turn their cameras on or off. If you're in control, you can tell them what you want them to do. Explain how discussions will be conducted. So tell people that you are taking questions or ask them to hold questions until the end. It's very, very important. Explain the role of all the participants. So I'm joined today by my colleagues Dan and Joe. Dan is going to be taking some notes while we're speaking, and Joe is here to add some additional information to mine. Joe is our technical expert, so she'll be able to answer all those technical questions, tell people who they're talking to and how it's going to work. If you are sharing the screens, again, I cannot emphasize enough, make sure that you share only what needs to be shared. Earlier today, I was in a workshop where somebody was sharing a screen and all their emails were visible on that screen for a full 15 minutes. You don't want that to happen. It's not a very good look, and it's actually a very bad security risk too. So just a couple of additional points around meeting etiquette. Be present. That means you need to be there from start to finish. Do not be distracted by things happening around you. Be present and be aware. If someone in your team has forgotten to turn off a microphone, you need to tell them. If someone's speakers are feeding back, you need to tell them. If someone's camera is focused on their belly button, you need to tell them that too. And plan for an effective wrap-up. Clearly sum up all action items, outline the next steps, including follow-up meeting times, and then end the meeting for all by closing your meeting app. Of course, if you've been invited to the meeting, it's not up to you to close the app, but when you have said all your goodbyes, turn off and leave. It's really awkward when somebody kind of hangs around waiting for a meeting to be ended. Now we've got all that technical stuff that we've talked about. Now, of course, the all-important presenting part of the conversation. There are 4 principles of great presentations. We touched on these yesterday. Number 1, you need to understand your audience. Number 2, you need to prepare your content. Number 3, you need to deliver with confidence. And number 4, you need to control your environment. So let's look at those in a little bit more detail. So you need to understand your audience. That means you need to understand their profile, their needs, their wants, their expectations, and their current knowledge. So profile, quite simply, who is it that you're going to be speaking to? What is their job title? Who are they in the organization? What is the common element that brings them together? Are they all here listening to your pitch because they are interested in buying from you? Are they all together because some are interested in buying, some are really just wanting to get a sense of what is out there, others might just have been called in to fill up space? You need to get some sense of what has brought this group of people together, and you need to do some research. If at all possible, try to find out ahead of time who it is you'll be meeting and try to get a sense of what it is that floats their boat. Now, the needs of your audience. Everyone has needs and everyone has wants. So the needs, first of all. Why are they attending the presentation? What is it that they need to know by the time you are finished? Is it that they need to know what your product range is? Is it that they need to know how large your team is in terms of delivering service backup? Is it that they need to understand more about your business? What is it that they absolutely need to know by the end of this presentation? If you have given them that, there's a very good chance that you will be successful. But the need is always balanced by the want. So in addition to what they need to have, what is it that they want from your presentation? Do they just want to increase their knowledge? Maybe they're just doing a bit of a shopping exercise. Do they want to learn something? Do they want to buy something, or do they want to be entertained? How can you make sure that their interests are connected with your message? And that all comes down to doing your homework. You need to be able to do as much research beforehand about the organization and the people to whom you are presenting. Prior knowledge. Every single person that you will ever be presenting to has knowledge of something. You need to try to understand what that knowledge is, build from the knowledge that they already have, and don't start assuming that they do not know everything. There is really few things as bad as assuming that your customer doesn't know anything about what you do. There's a very good chance they might know more than you do. So assume that people have a basic level of knowledge and take it from there. That is very, very important to do. Now, I've just had somebody ask a question about what is the best way to research your audience. Well, it's the easiest thing in the world to research today. It wasn't so easy 20 years ago. Now you have got the world literally at your fingertips because all the information you need almost certainly exists online. You know the name of the company that you're meeting. Go online, look at their website. That's the first port of call. But then run a Google search on them. Look for reviews on that business. Find newspaper articles that are posted online, all those social media pages that they might be mentioned in or that they might run. So do online desk research. Also speak to your bilateral business chamber. Your bilateral business chamber will have a wealth of information about the companies and the organizations in the other country. So let's say, for example, you're going to do business in Korea. Go to the Korea Australia Business Chamber and ask them about that company. They'll be able to give you a lot more information than you might be able to find online, particularly if the information you find online is written in a language that you do not speak and understand. So start with straight desk research. Go online. Don't just go to the company website, though. Run that Google search. Find a way to track down all their social media posts. Find them in media. If they've been quoted in a newspaper article or they've been quoted in some online forum, it'll be there. That's the best way for you to approach that, and then speak to your bilateral chambers. If you're part of a virtual trade mission, a lot of the information that you will be after will already be in the hands of Global Victoria. So make sure that you speak to Stuart Bland or someone else in that team who will be able to give you a lot of background information as well. So assume that your customer knows about your business, and certainly assume that your customer knows about your product, and build on that. Prepare your content before you even enter that global forum. By the time you've checked that your equipment works, your microphone works, your lighting works, all that stuff is great. You don't have to think about that anymore. You can just concentrate on the content that you have to present. So just a few pointers. Keep them hungry. What does that mean? Well, that means that you always have to leave something on the table. You have to open a door and leave something there that invokes a question so that you can answer the question and start a conversation. Always start off with a great hook. So start with something about your business that is really great. And if you've prepared that pitch and you've used your message map and all the other tools that you have at your service, you will have a hook. Catch them with the hook and then give them the rest. Always start with the ending. So tell them what they can expect from your presentation, and then you work towards that. Always have takeaway points. So by the time you've delivered your pitch and you've expanded on your presentation, give your potential customers something that they can take away with them, think about, apply, etc. What you are doing ultimately is telling a story, and the story has a beginning and a middle and an end. So follow that narrative path. You don't get bogged down in details, but you tell a story so that your customer has a sense of who and what you're about and who and what your products are about. Always present ideas logically. So start at the beginning and work your way through to the end. Use facts and figures as necessary, but not to excess. If you are providing background information, by all means do so. It helps to build some of that rapport, but only provide the essential stuff. So you might want to mention that your company was started 30 years ago in your garage. It was you and your dog and a computer. That's relevant. They don't need to know the name of your dog. They don't need to know the model of the computer and the fact that it was still running on a DOS system. That's extraneous. No one needs to know that stuff. Always outline the actions and the takeaways, and finish strong. Some people start a presentation really strong. They've got all sorts of great stuff, and then they kind of lose the track of it and they peter out towards the end. People will only remember the end. They won't remember the strong start. So please bear that in mind. If you've got a limited amount of time, so if you have been told that you only have 2 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes, stick to your prepared pitch. If they then ask questions, the ball is back in their court in terms of allowing extra time, and that's when you can embellish and allow some more information to be imparted. Always deliver with confidence. Beware very much of gesturing when you're delivering online. So if you're somebody who talks with your hands and you have this sort of action happening, don't do it when you're online. It's really distracting. And there's also a good chance that you're going to smack your microphone and make a terrible noise. So don't use your hands when you're talking online. If you're doing it in person, and who knows, there are opportunities these days where we actually have face-to-face meetings, use gestures for effect and not for comfort. If you find that you're the sort of person who talks with your hands because you're uncomfortable and you're nervous, you have to hold on to something so that you can't use your hands. I've often told people that if they need to sit on their hands so they can't use them. Of course, you can't do that online because you actually have to use your mouse to move things around. But be conscious of the fact that you shouldn't use your hands too much online. Always pause for effect and let your audience take in your key points. So if you've got a limited amount of time, the temptation is to fit as much as possible into that limited amount of time by talking too quickly. You're not doing yourself any favors if you do that. Slow down, pause, let your audience take it in. They need an opportunity to digest. Always connect with your audience. It's difficult to do online, but it's possible. And one of the ways you do it is by actually looking into your camera. That way you are looking your audience in the eye. Be passionate about what you do. You really do need to care about what you do, and you need to convey that you care about what you do, what you sell, what you produce, the service that you provide. If you don't care about it, how on earth can your audience care about it? Always be yourself. Don't be funny if you're not, and stick to time. Always, always stick to time. Now, we've talked a fair bit about controlling your environment online. Just to recap, create some of that private, quiet space for your meeting. Check your background. Make sure that nothing is visible that you do not want seen. If you are using a virtual background, make it appropriate and make sure that it works okay, that you're not swimming in and out of it and everybody is getting seasick watching you. Ensure that nothing you don't want seen is visible on camera. And then plan what you're going to say, plan what is going to be visible, plan what you are going to show. If you have a slide deck, plan it out, know what every single component is and why, and practice, practice, practice before you get to the presentation. And then, and this again, I cannot stress enough, always have a backup and always have a backup plan. What do you do if you lose power and you suddenly don't have a computer anymore? Well, you might have to resort to the old-fashioned telephone then. You might have to ring the company that you've just lost the connection with to explain that you've lost the connection because you've had a power failure, but could you still have a conversation with them? If what you lose is just your microphone, continue to speak, explain that you've lost your camera, but you can still speak, and so forth. So make sure that you always have a backup plan. Understand how you're going to respond in the case of a crisis, whether you lose something, whether something blows up, whether you simply can't find your slides, or you cannot share your slides. Understand what you're going to do if something doesn't work. You cannot just walk away because something hasn't worked. If you're presenting in person, what happens if you lose your microphone, for example? Think about the same thing if you're doing it online. And we touched yesterday, for those of you that attended yesterday's pitching session, on international audiences. Just want to expand a little bit on some of that. You need to think about who it is that you're presenting to. And this comes back to the research that you're going to do and understanding your audience. You need to understand if language is an issue. And if language is an issue, understand how that impacts your message. At all costs, avoid colloquialisms, avoid idioms, and avoid humor. The Australian humor is not necessarily the humor anywhere else in the world. What we find funny, the rest of the world doesn't necessarily find funny. So avoid it. It's not professional anyway. So avoid colloquialisms, avoid idioms that might not be understood, and avoid humor. Also understand that the language you speak, if it's a technical language, might not be the same technical language in another country. So find a way to simplify what you're saying. It always adds a little bit of rapport if you deliver a greeting in the language of your audience. So learn how to say hello in Mandarin or in Japanese or in Korean. But check first if that's appropriate. And again, your bilateral chamber will be able to give you a lot of guidance here. And you can find some information online as well. So find out if it's going to be offensive if you say hello in a language and possibly get the greeting wrong or your pronunciation is wrong. In most cases, and I would say probably 99% of all cases, it's perfectly okay for you not to have 100% right. And people really appreciate you making the effort. So do that if it's appropriate. Make sure that you get it as right as you possibly can. Do you need to have material translated? So maybe you're presenting in English, but you've decided that some of your slides will be in the other language. Make sure that whatever messaging you have remains the same once it has been translated. So have it translated by a professional and then have somebody who is not you look at what's been written in that other language and tell you if it still says what you think you said it does. Very important to have that co-translation happen. Any material that you are presenting to a foreign audience, try to circulate it ahead of time so that they've got an opportunity to read it and digest it and possibly have it translated for themselves if you're presenting it to them in English. That way, they know what's there. They've already digested it by the time you deliver your presentation. Always adapt your pitch to the market. So, as we pointed out yesterday, some markets are a lot more casual, some are more formal. Your pitch needs to have the right tone for the market. Also, consider those cultural sensitivities. So, are you the best person to deliver the pitch, or is somebody else in your business better in that particular market? Always dress appropriately for your market and your audience. Make sure that the way in which you are clothed is the way in which you want to be seen. And if you are in a market with cultural sensitivities, you need to dress appropriately, particularly in some markets where you need to be clothed in a certain way and to a certain extent. Do not show flesh if flesh is not acceptable. You probably shouldn't have that in a business environment anyway. Your personal style is your personal style. Practice that at home in your own time.